Throughout the Western world, becoming a legal adult is usually celebrated by consuming large quantities of alcohol. Whilst this is at best unwise and at worst potentially fatal, there are tribes throughout the world who take the coming of age much more seriously. Realistically, the most harrowing thing that happened to most of us after coming of age was that we experienced a mega hangover. Imagine that if you wanted to be considered an adult, you had to have so much venom injected into your hand that you'd pass out and lose the use of the appendage for several weeks afterward. Doesn't bear thinking about. Nevertheless, in this episode, we're going to think all about it, so let's get into it. We briefly alluded to this ritual in the introduction, but even though it is probably the most well-known tribal rite of passage, we believe that it deserves a full explanation. So, what exactly is Wildman? The Satir Maui tribe can be found deep within the Brazilian rainforests. Having as little to do with the outside world as possible, the Satir Maui live entirely off the land, passing down ancient survival and hunting techniques from generation to generation. Unfortunately, for any boys who are born to the tribe, in order to ascend to what, in other cultures, might be referred to as the warrior class, you have to undergo an almost unimaginably painful test. One of the many insects which also calls this forest home is the bullet ant. These ants, which can grow as long as 1.5 inches, that's nearly 4 centimeters, pack a powerful sting that is described as 30 times more potent than that of your average bee, or about the equivalent of being shot. Now, you might be under the impression that the best thing to do with these ants is to interact with them as infrequently as possible, and, well, we'd agree with you. However, the Satir Maui take a different approach. Once a boy reaches the age of 12, he will undergo the first coming-of-age ritual. He, and anybody who's going to participate, will spend the morning collecting vast quantities of these highly venomous ants and deliver them to the local shaman. After soaking them for a while in a solution which renders them unconscious, he carefully weaves them into gloves made from leaves and vines, making sure, of course, that the stingers are pointing inwards. When the ants regain consciousness, each participant is expected to place one of the gloves on his hand and keep it there for about 10 minutes. Considering that one sting is apparently the same as being shot, we can only imagine the excruciating pain that the participants go through. According to one account, quote, "The venom shoots quickly through the blood of the body and into the muscles. The muscles become extremely weak. The entire body shakes, the lips swell, and the eyelids begin to droop. The young men sweat profusely and drool uncontrollably. They will not be aware of their surroundings and may become very confused. If that were not bad enough, the whole hand turns black, and the participant will temporarily at least lose both feeling and function of the entire arm." But is that it? Once the child has completed the ritual, are they now considered a man? Well, no. In fact, that is only the beginning. In order to be considered worthy, each participant will have to undergo the challenge a further 19 times over the next months and years. The adrenaline junkies among you may very well have participated in a bungee jump. However, odds are that it was done with extremely stringent safety precautions in place. We wonder if, as you hurtled towards the ground attached to exceptionally well-maintained and tested safety equipment, whether it occurred to you just why exactly people do this. Well, here's the answer. Nagol, or land diving, originated on Pentecost Island, one of the islands that make up the nation of Vanuatu, located in the southwestern Pacific Ocean. According to local legend, there once was an evil man who would frequently beat and abuse his wife. One day, after having endured this for many years, she finally had enough and fled the village. Unfortunately, he noticed almost straight away and immediately began to pursue her. In a last effort to elude capture, she climbed to the top of the tallest tree that she could find. The husband eventually found her hiding place, and as he climbed the tree in a blind rage, she quickly hatched a plan. Quickly fashioning 2 ropes from nearby vines, she waited until he had almost reached her and then dove from the tree with the ropes tied around her ankles. Believing that his wife had died, the husband was immediately so grief-stricken that he too leapt from the top of the tree. Unfortunately for him, he had no stretchy vines to save him, and while he was killed on impact, his wife walked away unscathed. This sparked the tradition of land diving. Every year during the yam harvest, wooden towers of approximately 30 meters in height are constructed for men and boys to leap from wearing their own handmade ropes. Far from being an exhilarating sport, the land diving ritual has great cultural significance. The young boys who jump from lower platforms on the tower do so in order to prove their bravery, and the older participants who jump from the very top do so because it is believed that the higher the jump, the higher the crops will grow. For a jump to be considered successful, the vines must slow the descent so close to the ground that part of the body touches it. As you can imagine, this leaves very little room for error, and many people have been injured or killed over the years. In 1974, during a visit by Queen Elizabeth II, a land diving event was held out of season in her honor. Unfortunately, due to the fact that the vines were much drier than they should have been, many of them broke, resulting in several injuries and one fatality. Although this probably goes without saying, we shall say it anyway. Do not try this at home. Ever killed a spider or a fly with a rolled up newspaper and felt pretty smug about it? Perhaps you congratulated yourself on your cat-like reflexes and bravery in the face of adversity. Well then, maybe you should consider taking a vacation to the East African Great Lakes and joining up with the Maasai tribe and really testing your mettle. Although most people recognize the Maasai for their distinctive dress, far fewer people are aware of the tribe's particularly foolhardy test of manhood. In days gone by, should a skilled and confident young man wish to become recognized as a fully fledged warrior, he would have to participate in the lion hunt. Whilst this is exactly what it sounds like, there were many strict rules to which the participant must adhere. Firstly, this was a solo expedition. The would-be warrior would set off with no supplies, hardly any clothing, and nothing but a spear to help even the odds. He couldn't just find a lion cub, jam his spear through it, and head home victorious. There were specific requirements as to exactly what kind of lion he must hunt. According to one article on the subject, quoting, "To make things more challenging, the rule stated that the warrior could not hunt lions that were sick, poisoned, snared, or otherwise incapacitated. What is more, the rules prohibited the hunting of lionesses. The Maasai considered them bearers of life in every species, so only the most dangerous male lions were hunted. Now, as you may be able to imagine, the success rate for each endeavor was not exactly high. However, for those who brought home the prize, as it were, the glory would have been tremendous. More recently, probably due to both the decline in lions and members of the Maasai themselves, the rules were changed to allow would-be lion killers to go out in groups. There is no doubt that this would have greatly increased the chances of success, but being able to legitimately claim that you took down a lion single-handed is far cooler than having to admit that it took you and 10 of your mates. Brazil's most Amazonian tribe, the Matsis, successfully avoided outside interference until the mid-1970s. So unaware were they of outside goings-on that it has been claimed that they believed airplanes flying overhead were the spirits of their ancestors. Much like the other tribes that we've discussed today, which, if you think about it for a moment, says a lot about the human race's predisposition towards brutality, the Matsis have their own unbelievably dangerous, painful rituals that their young men must endure before being allowed to become part of a hunting party. First, they must voluntarily blind themselves, or at least temporarily blind themselves. After pouring a mixture of different poisons into his eyes, the boy must wait to see whether or not his sight will return. If it does, then the elders believe that not only will his sight be enhanced, but so will his other senses. Depending on how long the blindness lasts, this sort of makes sense. As a species, humans rely primarily on their sight for most tasks, so being deprived of that sense for a reasonable amount of time will force the brain to pay closer attention to the information provided by the other senses. The second test is not so logical. In order to remove laziness, the boy is repeatedly beaten and whipped with the stalks of the rattan plant. Assuming he survives these first two stages, he then undergoes a process which will allegedly improve both his strength and endurance. Poison is extracted from the Phylomedusa bicolor, a small green frog native to the area, and injected directly into the bloodstream. The effects of the poison are, shall we say, somewhat interesting. Most people who are subjected to the poison in this way will vomit immediately. However, should our intrepid young lad somehow manage to stave off the nausea, then he will be injected again. After the second dose, he will very definitely vomit, experience lightheadedness, and lose complete control of his bowels. After all this, the final stage of being rubbed with a poisonous plant that will leave a rash that lasts several hours doesn't actually seem that bad. Although all this will have finally proved the youngster to be manly enough to participate in the hunt, he may have to undergo the process again in preparation for important events. The Omo Valley of Ethiopia is home to several tribes, including the Kara, Bana, and Hamar. Within these tribes lurks an ancient fear, that of Mingi. According to legend, a child that is born Mingi is cursed, and for the good of the tribe, must be killed immediately. But how can they tell? Well, according to one book on the subject, almost any child could potentially be singled out, that is, if the given list of warning signs is to be believed. A child is believed to be Mingi if his top teeth come in before his bottom teeth, if he breaks a tooth or injures his genitals, if he is born to unwed parents, or if his parents do not have the ceremonial blessing of the village elders to have children. The most popular methods of child murder include drowning, abandonment, being thrown off a cliff, or suffocation. It's not just the children, though. Any parents who try to go against the tradition are also branded Mingi and are unceremoniously banished from the tribe. Now, it is possible that you might be thinking that some of this is a sort of ancient relic of the past, a tradition so barbaric that it must have died out hundreds of years ago. Sadly, that's not the case. Although it is obviously quite difficult to get official statistics on this, it is estimated that as many as 300 children every year fall victim to this particular ritual. The last entry today perhaps stretches the definition of tribal ritual slightly. However, we thought it might be nice to end on something a little less nightmarish. Over the years, people have come up with many creative ways to get the attention of various gods. Historically, these have usually involved sacrificing someone or something that is not themselves, be that an animal, a slave, or in some cases even their own child. The people of Tamil Nadu in southern India have a slightly different approach, and in comparison to some of the other things on this list, it's almost whimsical. On the second Tuesday of the Tamil month of Adi, thousands of people sit in front of the temple and ask to be smashed over the head with a coconut, either to ensure that their prayers are heard or to give thanks for prayers already answered. The reason behind this is fairly interesting. As the story goes, during the 19th century, the British attempted to build a railway line through the village. When the residents protested, they were told that if they would all break large stones with their heads, the workmen would reroute the track slightly in order to spare their homes. The residents did this, and this is the hardest part of the story to believe. The British then remained true to their word.
No way!
From that point onward, the head-smashing ritual became a yearly tradition. Even though the object of choice was quickly changed from a rock to a coconut, it is still not uncommon for people to sustain various injuries. In severe cases, people have been taken to hospital with concussions because the coconut wielder got sloppy. According to one eminent neurosurgery professor, if the coconut breaks, then although it may look worse, it is actually less likely to cause serious damage. This is because far less of the kinetic energy is transferred to the skull. Like many things, this tradition has become something of a tourist attraction, and thousands of people gather to watch the spectacle every year. Although being whacked over the head with a large coconut is undoubtedly both painful and dangerous, if for some reason we were forced to participate in one of the rituals on this list, then on balance, this is probably the one that we would go for.